The Maurya Empire was a geographically extensive Iron Age historical power in ancient India, ruled by the Maurya dynasty from 322 185 BCE. Originating from the kingdom of Magadha in the Indo-Gangetic plains in the eastern side of the Indian subcontinent, the empire had its capital city at Pataliputra. The empire was founded in 322 BCE by Chandragupta Maurya, who had overthrown the Nanda Dynasty and rapidly expanded his power westwards across central and western India, taking advantage of the disruptions of local powers in the wake of the withdrawal westward by Alexander's Greek armies. By 316 BCE the empire had fully occupied northwestern India, defeating and conquering the satraps left by Alexander. Chandragupta then defeated the invasion led by Seleucus I, a Greek general from Alexander's army, gaining additional territory west of the Indus River. The Maurya Empire was one of the world's largest empires in its time, and the largest ever in the Indian subcontinent. At its greatest extent, the empire stretched to the north along the natural boundaries of the Himalayas, to the east into Assam, to the west into Balochistan and the Hindu Kush mountains of what is now Afghanistan. The empire was expanded into India's central and southern regions by the emperors Chandragupta and Binsra, but it excluded a small portion of unexplored tribal and forested regions near Kalinga, until it was conquered by Ashoka. It declined for about 50 years after Ashoka's rule ended, and it dissolved in 185 BCE with the foundation of the Sunga dynasty in Magadha. Under Chandragupta and his successors, internal and external trade, agriculture and economic activities, all thrived and expanded across India thanks to the creation of a single and efficient system of finance, administration, and security. After the Kalinga War, the empire experienced nearly half a century of peace and security under Ashoka. Mauryan India also enjoyed an era of social harmony, religious transformation, and expansion of the sciences and of knowledge. Chandragupta Maurya's embrace of Jainism increased social and religious renewal and reform across his society, while Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism has been said to have been the foundation of the reign of social and political peace and non-violence across all of India. Ashoka sponsored the spreading of Buddhist ideals into Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, West Asia and Mediterranean Europe. The population of the empire has been estimated to be about 60 million, making the Mauryan Empire one of the most populous empires of antiquity. Archaeologically, the period of Mauryan rule in South Asia falls into the era of northern black polished ware. The Arthashastra and the Edicts of Ashoka are the primary sources of written records of Mauryan times. The lion capital of Ashoka at Sarnath has been made the national emblem of India. History, Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya. The Maurya Empire was founded by Chandragupta Maurya, with help from Chanakya, a Brahmin teacher at Takshashila. According to several legends, Chanakya travelled to Magadha, a kingdom that was large and militarily powerful and feared by its neighbours, but was insulted by its king Nanda, of the Nanda dynasty. Chanakya swore revenge and vowed to destroy the Nanda Empire. Meanwhile, the conquering armies of Alexander the Great refused to cross the Indus River and advance further eastward, deterred by the prospect of battling Magadha. Alexander returned to Babylon and redeployed most of his troops west of the Indus River. Soon after Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BCE, his empire fragmented, and local kings declared their independence, leaving several smaller disunited satraps. The Greek generals Eudemus and Ptithon ruled until around 317 BCE, when Chandragupta Maurya utterly defeated the Macedonians and consolidated the region under the control of his new seat of power in Magadha. Chandragupta Maurya's rise to power is shrouded in mystery and controversy. On one hand, a number of ancient Indian accounts, such as the drama Madrakshasa by Visakhadatta, describe his royal ancestry and even link him with the Nanda family. The Kshatriya clan, known as the Mauryas, are referred to in the earliest Buddhist texts, Mahaparinibbana Sutta. However, any conclusions are hard to make without further historical evidence. Chandragupta first emerges in Greek accounts as Chandrakoptos. As a young man he is said to have met Alexander. He is also said to have met the Nanda king, angered him, and made a narrow escape. Chandra's original intentions were to train a guerrilla army under Chandragupta's command. The Mudrakshasa of Visarkadutta as well as the Jaina work Parisishtapavan talk of Chandragupta's alliance with the Himalayan king Parvatka, sometimes identified with Porus. Conquest of Magadha. Chandra encouraged Chandragupta Maurya and his army to take over the throne of Magadha. Using his intelligence network, Chandragupta gathered many young men from across Magadha and other provinces, men upset over the corrupt and oppressive rule of King Dana, plus the resources necessary for his army to fight a long series of battles. These men included the former general of Taxila, accomplished students of Chanakya, the representative of King Porus of Kakkadi, his son Malaktu, and the rulers of small states. Preparing to invade Pataliputra, Maurya came up with a strategy. A battle was announced and the Magadhan army was drawn from the city to a distant battlefield to engage Maurya's forces. Maurya's general and spies meanwhile bribed the corrupt general of Nanda. He also managed to create an atmosphere of civil war in the kingdom, which culminated in the death of the heir to the throne. Chanakya managed to win over popular sentiment. Ultimately Nanda resigned, handing power to Chandragupta, and went into exile and was never heard of again. Chanakya contacted the Prime Minister, Rakshasas, and made him understand that his loyalty was to Magadha, not to the Nanda dynasty, insisting that he continue in office. Chanakya also reiterated that choosing to resist would start a war that would severely affect Magadha and destroy the city. Rakshasa accepted Chanakya's reasoning, and Chandragupta Maurya was legitimately installed as the new king of Magadha. Rakshasa became Chandragupta's chief advisor, and Chanakya assumed the position of an elder statesman. Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta campaigned against the Macedonians when Seleucus I, in the process of creating the Seleucid Empire out of the eastern conquests of Alexander the Great, tried to reconquer the northwestern parts of India in 305 BCE. Seleucus failed, the two rulers finally concluded a peace treaty. A marital treaty was concluded, in which the Greeks offered their princess for alliance and help from him. Chandragupta snatched the satrapies of Paropamisad, Arachosia and Gedrosia, and Seleucus I received 500 war elephants that were to have a decisive role in his victory against Western Hellenistic kings at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE. Diplomatic relations were established and several Greeks, such as the historian Megasthenes, Demarchus and Dionysius resided at the Mauryan court. Chandragupta established a strong centralized state with an administration at Pataliputra, which, according to Megasthenes, was surrounded by a wooden wall pierced by 64 gates and 570 towers. Rivaled the splendors of contemporaneous Persian sites such as Susa and Ecbatana. Chandragupta's son Binsara extended the rule of the Mauryan Empire towards southern India. The famous Tamil poet Mamulana of the Sanjam literature described how the Deccan plateau was invaded by the Maurya army. He also had a Greek ambassador at his court, named Dimachus Strabo. Megasthenes describes a disciplined multitude under Chandragupta, who live simply, honestly, and do not know writing. The Indians all live frugally, especially when in camp. They dislike a great undisciplined multitude, and consequently they observe good order. Theft is of very rare occurrence. Megasthenes says that those who were in the camp of Sandrakotos, wherein lay 400,000 men, found that the thefts reported on any one day did not exceed the value of 200 drachmae, and this among a people who have no written laws, but are ignorant of writing, and must therefore in all the business of life trust to memory. They live, nevertheless, happily enough, being simple in their manners and frugal. They never drink wine except at sacrifices. Their beverage is a liquor composed from rice instead of barley, and their food is principally a rice pottage. Strabo 15. I. 53 Euro 56, quoting Megasthenes. Binsara. Binsara was the son of the first Mauryan emperor Chandragupta Maurya and his queen Dudhara. During his reign, the empire expanded southwards. According to the Javalikathra Jain work, the original name of this emperor was Simhasana. According to a legend mentioned in the Jain texts, Chandragupta's guru and advisor Chanakya used to feed the emperor with small doses of poison to build his immunity against possible poisoning attempts by the enemies. One day, Chandragupta, not knowing about poison, shared his food with his pregnant wife Queen Dudhara, who was 7 days away from delivery. The queen, not immune to the poison, collapsed and died within few minutes. Chanakya entered the room the very time she collapsed, and in order to save the child in the womb, he immediately cut open the dead queen's belly and took the baby out. By that time a drop of poison had already reached the baby and touched its head, due to which child got a permanent bluish spot on his forehead. Thus, the newborn was named Binsra. Binsra, just 22 a year old, inherited a large empire that consisted of what is now, northern, central and eastern parts of India along with parts of Afghanistan and Balochistan. Binsra extended this empire to the southern part of India, as far as what is now known as Karnataka. He brought 16 states under the Mauryan Empire and thus conquered almost all of the Indian peninsula. Binsra didn't conquer the friendly Dravidian kingdoms of the Cholas, ruled by King Ilam Chetsani, the Pandyas, and Cheras. Apart from these southern states, Kalinga was the only kingdom in India that didn't form a part of Binsra's empire. It was later conquered by his son Ashoka, who served as the viceroy of Ujjaini during his father's reign. Binsra's life has not been documented as well as that of his father Chandragupta or of his son Ashoka. Chanakya continued to serve as prime minister during his reign. According to the medieval Tibetan scholar Taranatha, who visited India, Chanakya helped Binsra to destroy the nobles and kings of the 16 kingdoms and thus to become absolute master of the territory between the eastern and western oceans. During his rule, the citizens of Taxila revolted twice. The reason for the first revolt was the maladministration of Sasima, his eldest son. The reason for the second revolt is unknown, but Binsra could not suppress it in his lifetime. It was crushed by Ashoka after Binsra's death. Ambassadors from the Seleucid Empire and Egypt visited his courts. He maintained good relations with the Hellenic world. Unlike his father Chandragupta, Binsra believed in the Ajivika sect. Binsra's guru Pingala Vatsa was a Brahmin of the Ajivika sect. Binsra's wife, Queen Subhadrangi, was a Brahmin also of the Ajivika sect from Champa. Binsra is accredited with giving several grants to Brahmin monasteries. Binsra died in 272 BCE and was succeeded by his son Ashoka the Great. Ashoka the Great. Chandragupta's grandson Ashokvardhan Maurya, son of Binsra, was also known as Ashoka or Ashoka the Great. As a young prince, Ashoka was a brilliant commander who crushed revolts in Ujjain and Taxila. As monarch he was ambitious and aggressive, reasserting the empire's superiority in southern and western India. But it was his conquest of Kalinga which proved to be the pivotal event of his life. Although Ashoka's army succeeded in overwhelming Kalinga forces of royal soldiers and civilian units, an estimated 100,000 soldiers and civilians were killed in the furious warfare, including over 10,000 of Ashoka's own men. Hundreds of thousands of people were adversely affected by the destruction and fallout of war. When he personally witnessed the devastation, Ashoka began feeling remorse. Although the annexation of Kalinga was completed, Ashoka embraced the teachings of Buddhism, and renounced war and violence. He sent out missionaries to travel around Asia and spread Buddhism to other countries. Ashoka implemented principles of ahimsa by banning hunting and violent sports activity and ending indentured and forced labor. While he maintained a large and powerful army, to keep the peace and maintain authority, Ashoka expanded friendly relations with states across Asia and Europe, and he sponsored Buddhist missions. He undertook a massive public works building campaign across the country. Over 40 years of peace, harmony and prosperity made Ashoka one of the most successful and famous monarchs in Indian history. He remains an idealized figure of inspiration in modern India. The Edicts of Ashoka, set in stone, are found throughout the subcontinent. Ranging from as far west as Afghanistan and as far south as Andhra, Ashoka's edicts state his policies and accomplishments. Although predominantly written in Prakrit, 2 of them were written in Greek, and 1 in both Greek and Aramaic. Ashoka's edicts refer to the Greeks, Kambojas, and Gandharas as peoples forming a frontier region of his empire. They also attest to Ashoka's having sent envoys to the Greek rulers in the west as far as the Mediterranean. The edicts precisely name each of the rulers of the Hellenic world at the time, such as Antiochus, Ptolemy, Amtikini, Marca and Antiochus Pseudo as recipients of Ashoka's proselytism. The edicts also accurately locate their territory 600 yojanas away, corresponding to the distance between the center of India and Greece. Decline: Ashoka was followed for 50 years by a succession of weaker kings. Pataliputra, the last ruler of the Mauryan dynasty, held territories that had shrunk considerably from the time of Emperor Ashoka, although he still upheld the Buddhist faith. Sengoku, Bhadratha was assassinated in 185 BCE during a military parade by the Brahmin general Pushyamitra Sunga, commander-in-chief of his guard, who then took over the throne and established the Sunga dynasty. Buddhist records such as the Asokavadana write that the assassination of Bhadratha and the rise of the Sunga Empire led to a wave of religious persecution for Buddhists, and a resurgence of Hinduism. According to Sir John Marshall, Pushyamitra may have been the main author of the persecutions, although later Sunga kings seem to have been more supportive of Buddhism. Other historians, such as Etienne Lamotte and Trimila Thapa, among others, have argued that archaeological evidence in favor of the allegations of persecution of Buddhists are lacking, and that the extent and magnitude of the atrocities have been exaggerated. Establishment of the Indo-Greek kingdom. The fall of the Mauryas left the Khyber Pass unguarded, and a wave of foreign invasion followed. The Greco-Bactrian king, Demetrius, capitalized on the breakup, and he conquered southern Afghanistan and parts of northwestern India around 180 BCE, forming the Indo-Greek kingdom. The Indo-Greeks would maintain holdings on the Trans-Indus region, and make forays into central India, for about a century. Under them, Buddhism flourished, and one of their kings, Nanda, became a famous figure of Buddhism. He was to establish a new capital of Sagala, the modern city of Silkut. However, the extent of their domains and the lengths of their rule are subject to much debate. Numismatic evidence indicates that they retained holdings in the subcontinent right up to the birth of Christ. Although the extent of their successes against indigenous powers such as the Sungas, Satavahanas, and Kalingas are unclear, what is clear is that Scythian tribes, renamed Indo-Scythians, brought about the demise of the Indo-Greeks from around 70 BCE and retained lands in the Trans-Indus, the region of Mathura, and Gujarat. Reasons: the decline of the Maurya dynasty was rather rapid after the death of Ashoka. One obvious reason for it was the succession of weak kings. Another immediate cause was the partition of the empire into two. Had not the partition taken place, the Greek invasions could have been held back, giving a chance to the Mauryas to re-establish some degree of their previous power. Regarding the decline, much has been written. Hariprasad Sastri contends that the revolt by Pushyamitra was the result of Brahmanical reaction against the pro-Buddhist policies of Ashoka and pro-Jaina policies of his successors. Basing themselves on this thesis, some maintain the view that Brahmanical reaction was responsible for the decline because of the following reasons. Prohibition of the slaughter of animals displeased the Brahmins as animal sacrifices were esteemed by them. The book Devayavadana refers to the persecution of Buddhists by Pushyamitra Sunga. Ashoka's claim that he exposed the Buddhavas as false gods shows that Ashoka was not well disposed towards Brahmins. The capture of power by Pushyamitra Sunga showed the triumph of Brahmins. All of these 4 points can be challenged. Ashoka's compassion towards animals was not an overnight decision. Repulsion of animal sacrifices grew over a long period of time. Even Brahmins gave it up. The book Devayavadana cannot be relied upon since it was during the time of Pushyamitra Sunga that the Sankhya and Bahut stupas were completed. The impression of the persecution of Buddhism was probably created by Nanda's invasion, since he was a Buddhist. The word Buddhava is misinterpreted because this word is to be taken in the context of some other phrase. The word normally means Brahm or to the first A, or Brahmin in classical Sanskrit, but perhaps the context here requires it to be understood differently. The victory of Pushyamitra Sunga clearly shows that the last of the Mauryas was an incompetent ruler since he was overthrown in the very presence of his army, and this had nothing to do with Brahmanical reaction against Ashoka's patronage of Buddhism. Moreover, the very fact that a Brahmin was the commander-in-chief of the Mauryan ruler suggests that the Mauryas and the Brahmins were cooperating. The question of Ashoka's religious affiliation bears reflection. He said of himself that he was a Buddhist. In his inscriptions he shows generosity to people of other religious orientations. While his doctrines follow the Buddhist middle path, his gifts are given to the Brahmins, Buddhist monks and others equally. His own name of adoption is Maurya Empire, the beloved of the gods. Raikotori argues against the arguments of Shastri. The empire had shrunk considerably and there was no revolution. Killing the Mauryan king while he was reviewing the army points to a palace coup d'état copyright act, not a revolution. The organization were ready to accept anyone who could promise a more efficient organization. Also, if Pushyamitra was really a representative of Brahmanical reaction, he Nabutin kings would have definitely given him assistance. The argument that the empire became effete because of Ashoka's policies is also very thin. All the evidence suggests that Ashoka was a stern monarch, although his reign witnessed only a single campaign. He was shrewd enough in retaining Kalinga, although he expressed his remorse. Well, he was worldly wise to enslave and half-lakh sudras of Kalinga and bring them to the Magadha region to cut forests and cultivate land. More than this, his tours of the empire were not only meant for the sake of piety but also for keeping an eye on the centrifugal tendencies of the empire. Which, addressing the tribal people, Ashoka expressed his willingness to forgive. More draconian was Ashoka's message to the forest tribes who were warned of the power which he possessed. This view of Raikotori on the pacifism of the state cannot be substantiated. Apart from these two major writers, there is a third view as expressed by D.D. Kozumbi. He based his arguments that unnecessary measures were taken up to increase tax and the punch-marked coins of the period show evidence of debasement. This contention too cannot be upheld. It is quite possible that debased coins began to circulate during the period of the later Mauryas. On the other hand, the debasement may also indicate that there was an increased demand for silver in relation to goods, leading to the silver content of the coins being reduced. More important point is the fact that the material remains of the post-Ashokan era do not suggest any pressure on the economy. Instead, the economy prospered as shown by archaeological evidence at Hastinapura and Sisupalkar. The reign of Ashoka was an asset to the economy. The unification of the country under single efficient administration, the organization and increase in communications meant the development of trade as well as an opening of many new commercial interest. In the post-Euro-Ashokan period, surplus wealth was used by the rising commercial classes to decorate religious buildings. The sculpture at Bharat and Sankai in the Deccan Caves was the contribution of this new bourgeoisie. Still another view regarding of the decline of Mauryas was that the coup of Pushyamitra was a people's revolt against Mauryan's oppression and a rejection of the Maurya adoption of foreign ideas, as far interest in Mauryan art. This argument is based on the view that Sangha art is more earthy and in the folk tradition that Mauryan art. This is more stretching the argument too far. The character of Sangha art changed because it served a different purpose and its donors belonged to different social classes. Also, Sangha art conformed more to the folk traditions because Buddhism itself had incorporated large elements of popular cults and because the donors of this art, many of whom may have been artisans, were culturally more in the mainstream of folk tradition. One more reasoning to support the popular revolt theory is based on Ashoka's ban on the samajas. Ashoka did ban festive meetings and discouraged eating of meat. These two might have antagonized the population, but it is doubtful whether these prohibitions were strictly enforced. The above argument also means that Ashoka's policy was continued by his successors also, an assumption not confirmed by historical data. Furthermore, it is unlikely that there was sufficient national consciousness among the varied people of the Mauryan Empire. It is also argued by these theorists that Ashokan policy in all its details was continued by the later Mauryas, which is not a historical fact. Still another argument that is advanced in favor of the idea of revolt against the Mauryas is that the land tax under the Mauryas was 1/4, which was very burdensome to the cultivator. But historical evidence shows something else. The land tax varied from region to region according to the fertility of the soil and the availability of water. A figure of 1/4 stated by Megasthenes probably referred only to the fertile and well-watered regions around Pataliputra. Thus the decline of the Mauryan Empire cannot be satisfactorily explained by referring to military inactivity, Brahmin resentment, popular uprising or economic pressure. The causes of the decline were more fundamental. The organization of administration and the concept of the state were such that they could be sustained only by kings of considerably personal ability. After the death of Ashoka there was definitely a weakening at the center, particularly after the division of the empire, which inevitably led to the breaking of provinces from the Mauryan rule. Also, it should be borne in mind that all the officials owed their loyalty to the king and not to the state. This meant that a change of king could result in change of officials, leading to the demoralization of the officers. Mauryas had no system of ensuring the continuation of well-planned bureaucracy. Your next important weakness of the Mauryan Empire was its extreme centralization and the virtual monopoly of all powers by the king. There was a total absence of any advisory institution representing public opinion. That is why the Mauryas depended greatly on the espionage system. Added to this lack of representative institutions, there was no distinction between the executive and the judiciary of the government. An incapable king may use the offices either for purposes of oppression or fail to use it for good purpose. And as the successors of Ashoka happened to be weak, the empire inevitably declined. Another associated point of great importance is the fact that the Mauryan Empire, which was highly centralized and autocratic, was the first and last one of its kind. If the Mauryan Empire did not survive for long, it could be because of the failure of the successors of Ashoka to hold on to the principles that could make success of such an empire. Further, the Mauryan Empire and the philosophy of the empire was not in tune with the spirit of the time because Aryanism and Brahmanism was very much there. According to the Brahmin or Aryan philosophy, the king was only an upholder of Dharma, but never the crucial or architecture factor influencing the whole of life. In other words, the sentiment of the people towards the political factor, that is the state, was never established in India. Such being the reality, when the successors of Ashoka failed to make use of the institution and the thinking that was needed to make a success of a centralized political authority, the Mauryan Empire declined without anyone's regret. Other factors of importance that contributed to the decline and lack of national unity were the ownership of land and inequality of economic levels. Land could frequently change hands. Fertility-wise, the region of the Ganges was more prosperous than northern Deccan. Mauryan administration was not fully tuned to meet the existing disparities in economic activity. Had the southern region been more developed, the empire could have witnessed economic homogeneity. Also, the people of the subcontinent were not of uniform cultural level. The sophisticated cities and the trade centers were a great contrast to the isolated village communities. All these differences naturally led to the economic and political structures being different from region to region. It is also a fact that even the languages spoken were varied. The history of a subcontinent and their casual relationships. The causes of the decline of the Mauryan Empire must, in large part, be attributed to top-heavy administration where authority was entirely in the hands of a few persons while national consciousness was unknown. Administration. The empire was divided into 4 provinces, which one of the 4, look like a giant crescent with the imperial capital at Pataliputra. From Ashokan edicts, the names of the 4 provincial capitals are Tosali, Ujjain, Suvarnagiri, and Taxila. The head of the provincial administration was the Kumara, who governed the provinces as king's representative. The Kumara was assisted by mayor Matyas and council of ministers. This organizational structure was reflected at the imperial level with the emperor and his mantri Parishad. Historians theorize that the organization of the empire was in line with the extensive bureaucracy described by Kautilya in the Arthashastra. A sophisticated civil service governed everything from municipal hygiene to international trade. The expansion and defense of the empire was made possible by what appears to have been the largest standing army of its time. According to Megasthenes, the empire wielded a military of 600,000 infantry, 30,000 cavalry, and 9,000 war elephants. A vast espionage system collected intelligence for both internal and external security purposes. Having renounced offensive warfare and expansionism, Ashoka nevertheless continued to maintain this large army, to protect the empire and instill stability and peace across West and South Asia. Economy. For the first time in South Asia, political unity and military security allowed for a common economic system and enhanced trade and commerce, with increased agricultural productivity. The previous situation involving hundreds of kingdoms, many small armies, powerful regional chieftains, and internecine warfare, gave way to a disciplined central authority. Farmers were freed of tax and crop collection burdens from regional kings, paying instead to a nationally administered and strict but fair system of taxation as advised by the principles in the Artha Shastra. Chandragupta Maurya established a single currency across India, and a network of regional governors and administrators and a civil service provided justice and security for merchants, farmers and traders. The Mauryan army wiped out many gangs of bandits, regional private armies, and powerful chieftains who sought to impose their own supremacy in small areas. Although regimental in revenue collection, Maurya also sponsored many public works and waterways to enhance productivity, while internal trade in India expanded greatly due to newfound political unity and internal peace. Under the Indo-Greek Friendship Treaty, and during Ashoka's reign, an international network of trade expanded. The Khyber Pass, on the modern boundary of Pakistan and Afghanistan, became a strategically important port of trade and intercourse with the outside world. Greek states and Hellenic kingdoms in West Asia became important trade partners of India. Trade also extended through the Malay Peninsula into Southeast Asia. India's exports included silk goods and textiles, spices and exotic foods. The external world came across new scientific knowledge and technology with expanding trade with the Mauryan Empire. Ashoka also sponsored the construction of thousands of roads, waterways, canals, hospitals, rest houses and other public works. The easing of many over-rigorous administrative practices, including those regarding taxation and crop collection, helped increase productivity and economic activity across the empire. In many ways, the economic situation in the Mauryan Empire is analogous to the Roman Empire of several centuries later. Both had extensive trade connections and both had organizations similar to corporations. While Rome had organizational entities which were largely used for public state-driven projects, Mauryan India had numerous private commercial entities. These existed purely for private commerce and developed before the Mauryan Empire itself. Religion. Hinduism was the major religion at the time of inception of the empire. Hindu priests and ministers used to be an important part of the emperor's court, for example Chanakya. James Hastings writes that they are devotees of Narayana, although Sri Lanka speaking of the Akandandins in another connection identifies them as Shaivas. Scholar James Hastings identifies the name Mankhaliputra, or Mankhali with the bamboo staff. Scholar Jitendra N. Banerjee compares them to the Pasupatas Shaivas. Another scholar, Charpentier, believes that the Ajivikas worshipped Shiva before Makhali Goshala. As Chanakya wrote in his text Chanakya Niti, humbly bowing down before the Almighty Lord Sri Vishnu, the Lord of the three worlds, I recite maxims of the science of political ethics selected from the various sutras. Even after embracing Buddhism, Ashoka retained the membership of Hindu Brahmana priests and ministers in his court. Mauryan society began embracing the philosophy of ahimsa, and given the increased prosperity and improved law enforcement, crime and internal conflicts reduced dramatically. Also greatly discouraged was the caste system and orthodox discrimination, as Mauryans began to absorb the ideals and values of Jain and Buddhist teachings along with traditional Vedic Hindu teachings. Buddhism. Magadha, the center of the empire, was also the birthplace of Buddhism. Ashoka initially practiced Hinduism but later embraced Buddhism. Following the Kalinga War, he renounced expansionism and aggression, and the harsher injunctions of the Artha Shastra on the use of force, intensive policing, and ruthless measures for tax collection and against rebels. Ashoka sent a mission led by his son Mahinda and daughter Sanghamitta to Sri Lanka, whose king Tissa was so charmed with Buddhist ideals that he adopted them himself and made Buddhism the state religion. Ashoka sent many Buddhist missions to West Asia, Greece and Southeast Asia, and commissioned the construction of monasteries, schools and publication of Buddhist literature across the empire. He is believed to have built as many as 84,000 stupas across India, that is Sankai and Mayabodhi Temple, and he increased the popularity of Buddhism in Afghanistan, Thailand and North Asia including Siberia. Ashoka helped convene the Third Buddhist Council of India and South Asia's Buddhist orders, near his capital, a council that undertook much work of reform and expansion of the Buddhist religion. Indian merchants embraced Buddhism and played a large role in spreading the religion across the Mauryan Empire. Jainism. Emperor Chandragupta Maurya embraced Jainism after retiring. At an older age, Chandragupta renounced his throne and material possessions to join a wandering group of Jain monks. Chandragupta was a disciple of Acharya Bhadrabahu. It is said that in his last days, he observed the rigorous but self-purifying Jain ritual of samsara, that is fast unto death, at Shravana-Belgola in Karnataka. However, his successor, Emperor Binsra, was a follower of another ascetic movement, a Eurojavika, and distanced himself from Jain and Buddhist movements. Samprati, the grandson of Ashoka, also embraced Jainism. Samrat Samprati was influenced by the teachings of Jain monks, and he is known to have built 125,000 dirazas across India. Some of them are still found in towns of Ahmedabad, Viramgam, Ujjain and Palitana. It is also said that just like Ashoka, Samprati sent messengers and preachers to Greece, Persia and Middle East for the spread of Jainism. But to date no research has been done in this area. Thus, Jainism became a vital force under the Mauryan rule. Chandragupta and Samprati are credited for the spread of Jainism in South India. Lakhs of temples and stupas were erected during their reign. But due to lack of royal patronage and its strict principles, along with the rise of Shankaracharya and Ramanuja, Jainism, once the major religion of southern India, began to decline. Architectural remains. Architectural remains of the Maurya period are rather few. Remains of a hypostyle building with about 80 columns of a height of about 10 meters have been found in Kumra, 5 km from Patna railway station, and is one of the very few sites that has been connected to the rule of the Mauryas. The style is rather reminiscent of Persian Achaemenid architecture. The grottos of Barabar caves are another example of Mauryan architecture, especially the decorated front of the Lormas Rishi grotto. These were offered by the Mauryas to the Buddhist sect of the Eurojavakas. The most widespread example of Maurya architecture are the pillars of Ashoka, often exquisitely decorated, with more than 40 spread throughout the Indian subcontinent. The protection of animals in India became serious business by the time of the Maurya dynasty. Being the first empire to provide a unified political entity in India, the attitude of the Mauryas towards forests, its denizens and fauna in general is of interest. The Mauryas firstly looked at forests as a resource. For them, the most important forest product was the elephant. Military might in those times depended not only upon horses and men but also battle elephants. These played a role in the defeat of Seleucus, one of Alexander's former generals. The Mauryas sought to preserve supplies of elephants since it was cheaper and took less time to catch, tame and train wild elephants than to raise them. Kartya Shastra contains not only maxims on ancient statecraft, but also unambiguously specifies the responsibilities of officials such as the protector of the elephant forest. On the border of the forest, he should establish a forest for elephants guarded by foresters. The office of the chief elephant forester should with the help of guards protect the elephants in any terrain. The slaying of an elephant is punishable by death. The Mauryas also designated separate forests to protect supplies of timber, as well as lions and tigers, for skins. Elsewhere the protector of animals also worked to eliminate thieves, tigers and other predators to render the woods safe for grazing cattle. The Mauryas valued certain forest tracts in strategic or economic terms and instituted curbs and control measures over them. They regarded all forest tribes with distrust and controlled them with bribery and political subjugation. They employed some of them, the food gatherers or Aranyaka, to guard borders and trap animals. The sometimes tense and conflict-ridden relationship nevertheless enabled the Mauryas to guard their vast empire. When Ashoka embraced Buddhism in the latter part of his reign, he brought about significant changes in his style of governance, which included providing protection to fauna, and even relinquished the royal hunt. He was the first ruler in history to advocate conservation measures for wildlife and even had rules inscribed in stone edicts. The edicts proclaimed that many followed the king's example in giving up the slaughter of animals. One of them proudly states, "Our king killed very few animals." However, the edicts of Ashoka reflect more the desire of rulers than actual events. The mention of a 100 panas fine for poaching deer in royal hunting preserves shows that rule breakers did exist. The legal restrictions conflicted with the practices freely exercised by the common people in hunting, felling, fishing and setting fires in forests. Contacts with the Hellenistic world. Foundation of the empire. Relations with the Hellenistic world may have started from the very beginning of the Maurya Empire. Plutarch reports that Chandragupta Maurya met with Alexander the Great, probably around Taxila in the northwest, Sandracotus, when he was a stripling, saw Alexander himself, and we are told that he often said in later times that Alexander narrowly missed making himself master of the country, since its king was hated and despised on account of his baseness and low birth. Plutarch 62-3, Reconquest of the Northwest. Chandragupta ultimately occupied northwestern India, in the territories formerly ruled by the Greeks, where he fought the satraps left in place after Alexander, among whom may have been Eudemus, ruler in the western Punjab until his departure in 317 BCE, or Pithon, son of Agena, ruler of the Greek colonies along the Indus until his departure for Babylon in 316 BCE. India, after the death of Alexander, had assassinated his prefects, as if shaking the burden of servitude. The author of this liberation was Sandracotus, but he had transformed liberation in servitude after victory, since, after taking the throne, he himself oppressed the very people he has liberated from foreign domination just in 4.13. Later, as he was preparing war against the prefects of Alexander, a huge wild elephant went to him and took him on his back as if tame, and he became a remarkable fighter and war leader. Having thus acquired royal power, Sandracotus possessed India at the time Seleucus was preparing future glory. Just in 4.19, conflict and alliance with Seleucus. Seleucus I Nicator, the Macedonian satrap of the Asian portion of Alexander's former empire, conquered and put under his own authority eastern territories as far as Bactria and the Indus, until in 305 BCE he entered in a confrontation with Chandragupta, always lying in wait for the neighboring nations, strong in arms and persuasive in council. Seleucus acquired Mesopotamia, Armenia, Seleucid Cappadocia, Persis, Parthia, Bactria, Arabia, Taperia, Sugdia, Arachosia, Hyrcania, and other adjacent peoples that had been subdued by Alexander, as far as the river Indus, so that the boundaries of his empire were the most extensive in Asia after that of Alexander. The whole region from Phrygia to the Indus was subject to Seleucus. Appian, History of Rome, the Syrian Wars 55. Though number accounts of the conflict remain, it is clear that Seleucus fared poorly against the Indian emperor as he failed in conquering any territory, and in fact, was forced to surrender much that was already his. Regardless, Seleucus and Chandragupta ultimately reached a settlement, and through a treaty sealed in 305 BCE, Seleucus, according to Strabo, ceded a number of territories to Chandragupta, including southern Afghanistan and parts of Persia. Accordingly, Seleucus obtained 500 war elephants, a military asset which would play a decisive role at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE. Marital Alliance. It is generally thought that Chandragupta married Seleucus's daughter, or a Greek Macedonian princess, a gift from Seleucus to formalize an alliance. In a return gesture, Chandragupta sent 500 war elephants, a military asset which would play a decisive role at the Battle of Ipsus in 302 BCE. In addition to this treaty, Seleucus dispatched an ambassador, Megasthenes, to Chandragupta, and later Deimachos to his son Binsra, at the Mauryan court at Pataliputra. Later Ptolemy II Philadelphus, the ruler of Ptolemaic Egypt and contemporary of Ashoka the Great, is also recorded by Pliny the Elder as having sent an ambassador named Dionysius to the Mauryan court. Mainstream scholarship asserts that Chandragupta received vast territory west of the Indus, including the Hindu Kush, modern-day Afghanistan, and the Balochistan province of Pakistan. Archaeologically, concrete indications of Mauryan rule, such as the inscriptions of the Edicts of Ashoka, are known as far as Kandahar in southern Afghanistan. The Treaty on Epigamia implies lawful marriage between Greeks and Indians was recognized at the state level, although it is unclear whether it occurred among dynastic rulers or common people, or both. Exchange of ambassadors. Seleucus dispatched an ambassador, Megasthenes, to Chandragupta, and later Deimachos to his son Binsra, at the Mauryan court at Pataliputra. Later Ptolemy to Philadelphus, the ruler of Ptolemaic Egypt and contemporary of Ashoka, is also recorded by Pliny the Elder as having sent an ambassador named Dionysius to the Mauryan court. Exchange of presents. Classical sources have also recorded that following their treaty, Chandragupta and Seleucus exchanged presents, such as when Chandragupta sent various aphrodisiacs to Seleucus, and Theophrastus says that some contrivances are of wondrous efficacy in such matters, as to make people more amorous. And Philolaus confirms him, by reference to some of the presents which Chandragupta, the king of the Indians, sent to Seleucus, which were to act like charms in producing a wonderful degree of affection, while some, on the contrary, were to banish love. Athenaeus of Naucratis, the Dionysophist's Book I, Chapter 32. His son Binsra Mitragata also is recorded in classical sources as having exchanged present with Antiochus I, but dried figs were so very much sought after by all men, that even Amytrocles, the king of the Indians, wrote to Antiochus, entreating him to buy and send him some sweet wine, and some dried figs, and a sophist. And that Antiochus wrote to him in answer, the dry figs and the sweet wine we will send you. But it is not lawful for a sophist to be sold in Greece. Athenaeus, Dionysophist I 1467, Greek population in India. Greek population apparently remained in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent under Ashoka's rule. In his Edicts of Ashoka, set in stone, some of them written in Greek, Ashoka describes that Greek population within his realm converted to Buddhism, here in the king's domain among the Greeks, the Kambojas, the Napakas, the Nabhipamkits, the Bojas, the Paitanikas, the Andhras and the Paladas, everywhere people are following beloved of the gods' instructions in Dharma. Rock Edict NB 13. Fragments of Edict 13 have been found in Greek, and a full edict, written in both Greek and Aramaic, has been discovered in Kandahar. It is said to be written in excellent classical Greek, using sophisticated philosophical terms. In this edict, Ashoka uses the word Eusbia as the Greek translation for the ubiquitous Dharma of his other edicts written in Prakrit. 10 years having been completed, King Paidasis made known piety to men. And from this moment he has made men more pious, and everything thrives throughout the whole world. And the king abstains from living beings, and other men and those who huntsmen and fishermen of the king have desisted from hunting. And if some intemperate, they have ceased from their intemperance as was in their power. And obedient to their father and mother and to the elders, in opposition to the past also in the future, by so acting on every occasion, they will live better and more happily. Buddhist missions to the West. Also, in the Edicts of Ashoka, Ashoka mentions the Hellenistic kings of the period as a recipient of his Buddhist proselytism, although no Western historical record of this event remain. The conquest by Dharma has been won here, on the borders, and even 600 yojanas away, where the Greek king Antiochus rules. Beyond there where the four kings named Ptolemy, Antigonos, Magas and Alexander rule, likewise in the south among the Kolas, the Pandyas, and as far as Tamrapani. Ashoka also claims that he encouraged the development of herbal medicine, for men and animals, in their territories, everywhere within beloved of the gods, King Piradasis, Ashoka's, domain, and among the people beyond the borders, the Kolas, the Pandyas, the Satilaputras, the Keralaputras, as far as Tamrapani and where the Greek king Antiochus rules, and among the kings who are neighbors of Antiochus, everywhere has beloved of the gods, King Piradasi, made provision for two types of medical treatment, medical treatment for humans and medical treatment for animals. Wherever medical herbs suitable for humans or animals are not available, I have had them imported and grown. Wherever medical roots or fruits are not available, I have had them imported and grown. Along roads I have had wells dug and trees planted for the benefit of humans and animals. Second Rock Edict. The Greeks in India even seem to have played an active role in the propagation of Buddhism, as some of the emissaries of Ashoka, such as Dharmaraksita, are described in Pali sources as leading Greek Buddhist monks, active in Buddhist proselytism. Subagsena and Antiochus III. Sophigasnus was an Indian Mauryan ruler of the 3rd century BCE, described in ancient Greek sources, and named Subagsena or Subhasena in Prakrit. His name is mentioned in the list of Mauryan princes, and also in the list of the Yadava dynasty, as a descendant of Pradyumna. He may have been a grandson of Ashoka, or Kunala, the son of Ashoka. He ruled an area south of the Hindu Kush, possibly in Gandhara. Antiochus III, the Seleucid king, after having made peace with Euthydemus and Bactria, went to India in 206 BCE and is said to have renewed his friendship with the Indian king there. He crossed the Caucasus and descended into India. Renewed his friendship with Sophigasnus, the king of the Indians. Received more elephants, until he had 150 altogether. And having once more provisioned his troops, set out again personally with his army, leaving Androsthenes of Cyzicus the duty of taking home the treasure which this king had agreed to hand over to him. Polybius 11.39, Timeline, 322 BCE. Chandragupta Maurya found the Mauryan Empire by overthrowing the Nanda Dynasty, 317 316 BCE. Chandragupta Maurya conquers the northwest of the Indian subcontinent. 305 303 BCE. Chandragupta Maurya gains territory from the Seleucid Empire. 301 269 BCE. Reign of Binsra, Chandragupta's son. He conquers parts of Deccan, southern India. 269 232 BCE. The Maurya Empire reaches its height under Ashoka, Chandragupta's grandson. 261 BCE. Ashoka conquers the kingdom of Kalinga. 250 BCE. Ashoka builds Buddhist stupas and erects pillars bearing inscriptions. 184 BCE. The empire collapses when Bradnatha, the last emperor, is killed by Pusyamitra Sangha, a Mauryan general and the founder of the Sangha Empire. See also, Mauryan art, Magadha, Nanda Dynasty, Gupta Empire, History of India, Notes. References, Chanakya, Arthashastra ISBN 0-14-044603-6, J.F.C. Fuller, The Generalship of Alexander the Great ISBN 0-306-81330-0, Greiner, John D. Seleucus Nicator, Constructing a Hellenistic Kingdom. Routledge. Kerr, John. India, A History. New York, HarperCollins Publishers. Cook, H. Rovmund, D.A. History of India, 4th, Routledge. Robert Morcott, The Penguin Historical Atlas of Ancient Greece ISBN 0-14-051335-3, Record Harai, H.C. Mukherjee, B.N. Political History of Ancient India, From the Accession of Paraxet to the Extinction of the Gupta Dynasty. Oxford University Press. Schwartzberg, J.E.A. Historical Atlas of South Asia. University of Oxford Press. Stein, Burton. A History of India, Oxford, Wiley Blackwell. External links, The Mauryan Empire at All Empires, Livius.org, Maurya Dynasty, Mauryan Empire of India, Extent of the Empire, The Mauryan Empire from Britannica, Ashoka and Buddhism, Ashoka's Edicts.